Welcome to the Third Generation Wrestling Podcast with your hosts, Eric and Rob.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. The Third Generation Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, the real Big E, with my co-host Rob, the Ambassador. What's going on tonight, sir? How you feeling? How did the Broncos do today? I didn't catch the game.
You know what, man? They won today. They won against a divisional rival, the Los Angeles Chargers. I've finally gotten used to calling them the Los Angeles Chargers, not the San Diego Chargers. It was a game I didn't expect them to win, man. I'm not sure what this Bronco team is, but they won today, and they play the Chiefs next week. And if they are able to beat the Chiefs next week, which they haven't done in their last 11 meetings, they will actually lead their division.
Wow. Well, that makes one of us. I can't say it. Well, the Bears did win, but I mean, it was the Lions. So
hey,
I went.
All you can do is beat the teams in front of you.
Yeah. I'm 2 for 2 this year. I didn't have to pay up, which is a good thing. But man, I mean, they had me sweating down to the last minute.
All right, but they got that win.
They got the win, but it was still, whatever. Ugly football. But we're here tonight to do something we haven't done in quite a while, and that is a countdown. And it was inspired by frequent guest on the show, MJ Book. He is the host of the Countdown podcast. So in the past, we've inspired him to do certain countdowns, and we even in our first year doing the show, we're doing a countdown. So he inspired me to do this one. It's a wrestling theme one, obviously, and it is our top 10 heels. So for me, this was not a hard list to come up with. Maybe more so hard as far as separating my 10 and honorable mentions was a little rough, but other than that, I kind of rattled the names off pretty quickly. I don't know about you, if you had a tough time, or was it just bang, bang, bang for you as well?
It started off bang, 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 but then it got a little rougher because, as I've said many times on the show, I'm the elder statesman here. I've been watching wrestling a little bit longer, and I wanted to make sure I included guys from my childhood, guys who really helped me fall in love with wrestling, some of the heels. So I wanted to look back at them as well. Most of my list does consist of guys you're probably familiar with, but yeah, when I started thinking back to some of my early days of wrestling, then is when it started to get a little tougher.
Yeah, I just had a thought. I got a shout out. Rest in peace, John Witherspoon. When I said bang, bang, made me think of him. Bang, 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 bang.
Oh yeah. Coordinate. You got to coordinate. Yeah, that brother, he's got a few quotables.
Oh man. Yeah. 45 minutes. Okay, so real quick, I'm just gonna throw out my honorable mentions. I got 5, and that's it. Not gonna be any more later. So Jeff Jarrett being one. I know we just talked about him recently on one of the retros, No Mercy. It's a weird love-hate relationship with him in WWE. I didn't really catch him in any other promotion. I know he went to WCW after. He kind of was the same character in WCW that he was in WWF at the time, actually. But yeah, I mean, he made the list. JBL, John Bradshaw Layfield. That specific character, I liked him when he was Bradshaw. I don't know. I can't remember his character before he was Bradshaw. But Yeah, the JBL character was an absolute prick in the dick. Okay. And when I think he held the belt for almost a year, which I couldn't believe. And his matches were terrible. I mean, they were awful. And he looked awful. This just, how do you get this long title reign? But he could work that mic and he could get under your skin. And that's what makes a good heel. Scott Hall, aka Razor Ramon. Now I knew him as I was late to the game as far as Scott Hall. By the time I had been introduced to him, he was in WCW already. The Invasion is right when him and Kevin Nash had invaded. I remember watching that one of those episodes. They invaded Nitro. They like kicked over all the WCW letters, and they put up NWO, and it was a huge thing. And I just remember Scott Hall, just everything about him. He was the bad guy you wanted to like, though, sometimes, until he went up against your baby face, and then you were kind of mad. He was just like this, couldn't stand him. But at the same time, he had the coolest catchphrase, with the toothpick and the "Hey yo." So, also from WCW, Eddie Guerrero, more so his heel work in WWE. It's more so what I'm referring to. Again, another heel that you kind of like, but at the same time, could go either way. And I know, we don't. This is like the forbidden name on this podcast, but you gotta call a spade. They're having the Bash at the Beach. Hollywood Hulk Hogan, specifically Hollywood Hulk Hogan. It was a huge turning point in wrestling to turn heel. And if you go back and watch that Bash at the Beach, people throwing everything they had into the ring, and just him cutting that scathing promo that had never been done. And he was the bad guy. He grew the beard. I mean, he was the bad guy. So I know it's sacrilege around here, but it is what it is. It happened.
Yeah. Okay. Well, man, my honorable mentions. This is where I took the opportunity to kind of throw in some of the guys I was talking about from my younger days, so that I wouldn't bog the podcast down with names, that probably most people aren't familiar with. But the first one I'm going to mention, I'm going to get it out of the way because, boy, I'm really conflicted about this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is a wrestler who I kind of caught later in his career, and I wasn't really a fan of this guy. I've actually been critical of this guy. He passed away recently, and it's New Jack. Now, New Jack is a tough wrestler for me because he seemed to have a complete disregard for the other wrestlers in the ring. He had out of the ring issues. But as far as heels go, this guy is one of the biggest heels ever because, man, it was real. I mean, the hatred that he had as a character, you really felt like, and in some cases, I think it actually was true, that he actually had actual hatred towards the wrestler he was wrestling. We all know about the incident with Vic Grimes, other incidents, and but man, the dude, to me, a great heel should make you believe his character, and a great heel should not be a likable guy. You should not like a heel. He should not make you laugh. You should not think a heel should be a heel. That's what a heel is, and he was all of that. He would do promo, I don't know how many people remember the OJ case. He would do promos about that, man. I mean, they would have to take him out. They could not take him out the regular side doors where the fans would gather for fear of his safety. And look, generate heat. That's what a heel's supposed to do, right or wrong, good or bad, politically correct or incorrect. That's what a heel's supposed to do, and he did that. From my childhood, I'm going to kind of lump these three together: Terry Funk, Abdullah the Butcher, and Bruiser Brody. All three of these guys, when I was a kid and kayfabe was the rule, and I believed wrestling was real, these guys all frightened me. You would very rarely see either one of these guys compete in a match and there not be blood, there not be, I mean, Abdullah the Butcher would bring a fork into the ring and jab it into the other guy's forehead. I mean, absolutely brutal and frightening as a child. They weren't cool, they weren't hip, they weren't funny, they were scary. And that's why I had to throw all three of these guys on the list. Bruiser Brody, I encourage people who haven't seen it to watch him on Dark Side of the Ring. He was brutally murdered by a fellow wrestler in Puerto Rico. And even though it was a well-known fact that he murdered Bruiser Brody, part of the reason he got off is because the prosecutor, the defendant, the lawyers defending him were able to convince the jury that Bruiser Brody, who was so frightening inside the ring, they were able to convince the jury that he was just as frightening outside the ring. And so Jose Gonzalez, who is the gentleman's name, got off on self-defense. That's how convincing he was in his character. But those three guys, and they all were hardcore, especially Abdullah the Butcher and Terry Funk. I believe Terry Funk introduced the world to the Texas Death Match. If I may be incorrect on that, but yeah, those three guys definitely deserve to be on a heel list. And then I'm going to go with one who I really have a fond memory of, and that's the Iron Sheik. The Iron Sheik is an Olympic wrestler. Yeah, he competed for Iran, but he came in and he played an Iraqi, he played an Irani. He would come in and he would say, Iran #1, America, and he would spit. This was back in the 80s when you could do that sort of thing. Now, if you did that sort of thing now, you might not be able to get that past your sponsors. He was the one who got Hogan over. Iron Sheik had defeated crowd favorite Bob Backlund to become the new WWF, it was at the time, champion. And he was so hated and despicable that helped to create the legend of Hulk Hogan, who eventually beat him and went on one of the greatest runs we've ever seen. So those are my top five: New Jack, Terry Funk, Abdullah the Butcher, Bruiser Brody, and the Iron Sheik.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. I mean, I would have thought Iron Sheik would have been in your top 10, no doubt.
This list was tough because what happened was I came up with the list of wrestlers who I knew I wanted to try and get on the list. And what I found is that as I was making the list, there was just guys who just I just couldn't get all 10 of them on, you know? Yeah, so.
Yeah, same here. Okay. I'm just going to kick it off here and we're going to get into this countdown. Number 10. I had to put him on here because, you know, it was a history making year, right? Arguably the biggest return of all time in wrestling. Second City Saint himself, CM Punk, coming in at number 10 for me. You know, he was always a heel, and especially when he was with the Straight Edge Society. That whole gimmick, it was him, not Carl Anderson. I can't think of his name. He was Festus and
Luke Gallows.
It was him, Luke Gallows, and Serena Deeb. For those that didn't know, yes, that's her. And I remember when he was first starting that whole faction, and he pointed to the crowd and he pulled Serena out and he shaved her head bald, and he got with Festus and sobered him up, and then he was I forget what his name was at the time, but anyway, I think it was just Gallows. Anyway, not important. I mean, he would go on these preachy rants. I don't know if you remember that Royal Rumble. I think it was 2009 or 2010. That Royal Rumble, he was just throwing people out and just kept taking the mic and just preaching and preaching. I'm like, dude, shut up. But that's heel stuff 101. And then who could forget? He did that, and then he did the Nexus after that. He was the leader of the Nexus, and then he really only turned babyface. I mean, these promos now, these pipe bombs was heel shit when he dropped the one about Vince, and when he started feuding with Cena. That's really what turned him face. Was pretty much the crowd was just like anybody but Cena at that point. So they chose him. But I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention the feud with the Undertaker, WrestleMania 29, using the death of Paul Bearer and the urn and all that. And I mean, I'm sure there was quite a bit of approval to do so, but it was still maniacal and evil as it gets. So, and he did not relent with that feud. So, yep, CM Punk, number 10.
All right. Surprisingly for me, Punk isn't on my list. And I know a lot of people are going to say, what, are you crazy? But I mean, obviously the pipe bomb, one of the greatest promos ever. And it was a heel promo, epic. But like I said, the 10 guys on here, these are just the guys I really wanted to put on here. And unfortunately, I couldn't fit CM Punk. My number 10, you mentioned in your honorable mentions, and this is going to be, I mean, look, obviously it's not the same talking about him as it used to be. And I'm talking Hollywood Hogan. Now, as everyone knows, I did not watch a lot of WCW, but that's why having him on my list is so interesting, because whether you were a WCW fan or just a wrestling fan in general, you heard about what happened at Bash at the Beach. That's one of the most shocking moments in wrestling history. I mean, Hulk Hogan, who at the time was the biggest face ever in the history of wrestling, turning heel. And I don't mean just turning heel, like, I mean, like turning a complete bastard. I mean, just that made waves all over the wrestling industry. And Hogan did have a short run as Hollywood in WWE, culminating in one of the, man, maybe not the best match, but I tell you what, I have never been a part of a crowd response in a single match that was as loud as Hogan versus The Rock. And that, to me, we've talked about it recently, like, okay, why did they never turn Cena heel? Why did they, for a long time, we kept saying, why wouldn't they turn Roman heel? They finally did that. Hogan is the proof that you can be the biggest face in the world. And if you do it the right way and turn them heel, you don't miss a beat. As a matter of fact, you can even generate more viewership, more excitement in your product. If you can turn Hulk Hogan heel, you can turn anyone heel. So no matter what you think of him now, that moment is a pivotal moment in wrestling history, and arguably the biggest face to heel turn ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that ain't even a question. It is the bookmark, the benchmark when people talk about making a turn. It is definitely the one people talk about. Okay, so my number 9 is somebody that ran with Hollywood Hulk Hogan back in the day, but you might know him under a different moniker. You might say he was perfect. Kurt Hennig, aka Mr. Perfect. Now, I didn't have the pre-WCW run when he was in WWF, but I do remember his time in WCW quite a bit. And when he came, it was him and Rick Rude. And I could not stand those two being together. They just emitted assholes. I mean, they just everything about, especially Rick Rude. I mean, his body language. I mean, he was bitter about other things too. Like he couldn't wrestle at the time; he was injured. But man, Kurt Hennig coming out, he always come out all cocky. You know, the one strap down and then chewing the gum and always popping it and catching it, and, you know, yeah. And he, oh man, just like he would come to the ring, cut these promos, talk all the shit in the world, and then same time be a chicken shit heel. begged and pleaded to wrestle Goldberg, and then it took like 2 months for it to happen. He faked the injury for like 2 months, and then they finally had the match. It's one of the better Goldberg matches. Still short. I ain't gonna lie, it's really short, but it's still it's with Curt Hennig. I do also remember when he came back to WWE in the Royal Rumble and held his own. That's probably the last real memory we have of him, like in a positive light. Because I mean, obviously his life was cut short, sadly, and but I distinctly remember him being somebody though, like probably one of the first heels outside of Hogan in WCW that I just really couldn't stand, and it's just everything about him. It's just so yeah, Mr. And who could forget? I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this real quick. The rap is crap with the West Texas Rednecks. Yes, I could not forget that either. Yeah, hated that. I really don't like that program really either. That whole thing with him and Master P. Yeah, but yeah, the rap is crap. Yeah.
Well, man, that's funny. My number 9 is also Mr. Perfect Hennig. And it's funny because I know him mostly from his WWF run. I remember all the vignettes of him, playing basketball, hitting every shot from half court, from the other end of the court, everything, baseball, hitting a home run every time, man, just the whole build up. And then obviously when he got to the roster, just the perfect prick. Like, you just look at this guy, he just looks like a prick. And like I said, there are some heels that are likable. And I'm not saying Curt didn't have some likability to him, but to me, a great heel truly is just, you just hate that dude. And that's how I felt about Curt. Now, by this time, of course, I know kayfabe is dead. I know he's playing a character. So I hate the character, but I love Curt Hennig. I actually, we have a local wrestling Hall of Fame here. It used to be in Newton. It's now in Waterloo, but I went and got to see Curt inducted. It was posthumous. He had passed away, but his father was there, and so was at the time a young Curtis Axel, who I of course wasn't a wrestler at the time. He just was Curt Hennig's son there to see his father get this honor. So, but yeah, man, number 9 on my list, Mr. Perfect, man, the perfect asshole, but great wrestler.
Oh yeah. I figure we both have him. I mean, it's hard not to put him on your list.
Oh man. I'm not sure. You look, man, like I said, all of this is subjective, but I'd be surprised at any wrestling fan in our age bracket who would not have Curt Hennig on their list at some point.
Right. Even just the honorable mention.
Yeah.
Okay. So for this guy, again, another WCW. I watch a lot of WCW. So those listening, that's kind of where my roots are from starting watching wrestling. And this guy got under my skin, but he could wrestle. But he got under my damn skin. Everything about him, the way he wore his hair, his bodyguard of choice. I might tip my hat with that one, but I'm talking about the Lionheart, the Ayatollah of rock and roller, Chris Jericho. If you go back and watch his WCW, his archive, it is like heel tape 101. Like, do this. Everything about him was douchey and just meant to get again under your skin. The way he walked out and would just, shoo the people away. He had his hair in like a bun up top here, and then who could forget Ralphus, the bodyguard, with the extra small shirt. He like I said, he could always wrestle. He was major in the cruiserweight in the TV title division, but he oh man, just his promo. I mean, he just knew how to piss you off. And then even when he got to WWE, who did he interrupt but The Rock? Come on. And still rocking that stupid hair, the same stupid hair. And then he would go on to beat, just I gotta say this shit again, The Rock and Stone Cold in the same night, and be the very first ever undisputed champion. And he would go on a massive heel run all the way to WrestleMania. And then, he would leave for a little while and come back and be a babyface, and he would leave again, and he could be a heel. Even now, still wrestling today, he can flip from being a heel to a babyface. And it's just a credit to the man. 50, 51 years old, still wrestling, still can pull it off. So, yes, he made the list. Number 8, Le Champion, Chris Jericho.
Man, gonna upset some listeners, but yeah, he did not make the cut for me, not because he doesn't deserve it, just because I'm hoping that as I go down my list, people will kind of see, okay, I can kind of see why maybe this guy didn't make it, that guy didn't make it. But yeah, Jericho, I just couldn't fit him on. But
it's your list, man.
It's your world. Yeah. My number 8 though is Randy Orton. Now, look, this guy came in calling himself the Legend Killer. And I mean, he was showing disrespect to all these old time wrestlers, everyone from the late great Harley Race to the late great Mae Young. I mean, I think Mae Young and Fabulous Moolah took a couple of bumps at the as a result of Randy. This dude came in as a young, cocky prick.
Mm-hmm.
And look, man, to be so young, he was convincing in that role, and probably because he really was a young, cocky prick,
it's easy to do when you actually are. I mean, you kicked out of the Marines.
Exactly. Now, he's gone back and forth effectively between heel and face, but you know what? I don't think anyone truly trusts Randy Orton as a face. That's how convincing he is as a heel. We're all waiting for the moment, like right now with Riddle. We're all waiting for that moment. Okay, Randy's going to get sick of this bullshit. He's going to RKO this dude, and the real Randy Orton's going to come out, because we know you cannot trust the Viper. No. I don't care. He only turns face for a little bit. Eventually, the Viper always comes out, because that is the essence of who Randy Orton really is, and that is he is best at, and that's why he made my list at number 8, Randy Orton.
Man, yeah, I'm gonna make some people mad because he ain't on my list. Just gonna put it out there now, and
well, not because I don't have to feel bad. We're gonna make both of us gonna make somebody mad.
It's not because I don't think he's a great heel. It's just I never despised or hated him more than the people on my list. That's just how that goes. I mean, I kind of probably could have threw him on an honorable mention, but I actually liked his career. I mean, I've enjoyed his career since he came in. God, I mean, I'm getting old if I've seen him since day one. But yeah, man, sorry. He just didn't make the cut.
Okay.
But who did? And I guess make some room because I got to get my.
Uh-oh.
Woo!
Oh, okay.
Number 7.
Nice.
The Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, there's so many images now. Again, different generation. So obviously, I'm seeing the older Flair, the Flair in late WCW days, and then, but the heel Flair that sticks out to me is when he was with Evolution, and he wrestled, but he was mainly Triple H's manager, and he was absolutely just annoying, and just like a annoying gnat at a barbecue, and during every match, and he would piss off JR and get JR going, and every match he would he would come down, He'd be nice and clean, cut with his suit. And by the time Triple H got to wrestling and his opponent got on offense, Rick, that jacket was off. He was throwing it. Them armpits was sweating, and he was sweating, and he would be under the ring trying to give Triple H the sledgehammer and getting into it with the ref or trying to get on the ring apron. You name it. Rick was there, and it got on my nerves. I mean, it didn't matter who Triple H was wrestling. If Rick was there, shenanigans. There's going to be shenanigans. But I do know also that he is, one of the greatest heels of all time, even from his promos back in the day. I mean, I've gone back and done my research. Obviously, he has all these famous, some of the most famous quotes in wrestling. He was always a heel. He's never been. He understood his role. My role is not to win the match. My role is to put on a good show. My role is to get the crowd involved, but I don't care about winning and losing. That doesn't mean anything to me. I'm still a 16-time world champion, the real 16-time world champion, not that John Cena bullshit. So, yes, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
All right. Well, look, Ric Flair is my GOAT. Obviously, he's on my list. He's a little bit further down, but we will get there. But my number 7 is one of his running mates at a time. You mentioned Evolution. And so right after another Evolution stablemate, I'm going with Triple H here. A lot of people probably thought he could be higher. And, some of these, like in the middle here, you could interchange these guys for me. One is not too much greater than the other. There's a very little distinction, but I had to rank them. So this is where I put Triple H. But look, when you talk about pricks, look, he comes in as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the aristocrat, thinking he's better than everyone, looking down his ample nose, because, Triple H has a pretty good sized nose, looking down his nose at people. And man, it fit him perfectly. And as he went on to become a member of DX, even before that, I mean, this guy just was able to carry that heel persona. He's one of those wrestlers, once again, he's been both face and heel, but in my estimation, always more convincing as a heel. And as he developed his body, becoming this huge, I mean, the guy just looked like an intimidating badass. And so to have the attitude going with it, man, this guy just was a perfect foil for whether it was Stone Cold or whether it was The Rock, who were huge faces at the times they were feuding with him some of the time. I mean, he just was perfect in that role. And so that's why I'm putting him at my number 7, the great future Hall of Famer, Triple H.
Oh, he's definitely on my list, but we got a little while before we get to him.
Right. Okay.
A little while. But yes, the aristocrat. Anytime I think of the aristocrat character, it's that damn pig pen match.
Yeah, man. I was thinking about that as I was speaking about it. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Oh man,
was it Henry Godwin? One of the Godwins?
Henry O'Godwin.
Yeah.
Oh man, just all kinds of filth in there. I just remember Triple H's hair just covered in that shit, literally.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, coming in at number 6, and there's a specific time frame. A lot of these is like specific time frames because some of these characters are gone, back and forth. It's very rare somebody's always a heel for decades and decades, because eventually, even if you want to be, the crowd's not going to let you. So that kind of tends to happen. And it happened with this person too, no different. But during this time, speaking specifically, he was definitely probably number 1 heel in the company. And I'm talking the dead man himself, The Undertaker. Specifically, the Ministry of Darkness era, which is kind of right when I came into the WWF. You know, he had the whole thing where he kidnapped Stephanie, that whole segment, and hello, Stephanie, in the limousine. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
And then Ken Shamrock putting the ankle lock on Christian, and they found her. And the feud he had with Austin, he had Austin on the cross, whatever that was. He had him and then raised him up
Yeah,
into
it
the
was the
rafters.
Taker symbol, was the U
Yeah.
and the T, yeah.
And then who could forget when, I don't know if you remember this, when they took him to the funeral home and they were going to embalm him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's not the silliest shit that they did.
No.
The higher power thing,
Yeah.
that, man, that felt so flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, just didn't work. But he was still top heel at the time. I mean, he had the biggest stable, one of the largest stables ever, really. The Ministry of Darkness. You had the Acolytes, you had Midian and Visceral, you had Christian and Edge, you had Shane McMahon even was in the ministry at one point. Let's not forget that. And they were hugely responsible for SmackDown being a success. Because remember, SmackDown was an experiment first. They did that one show to see how it would do. It did well, and the ministry was kind of, the heels ran that show. And based off that success, it became a weekly program. But let's not forget who came up with the term, because Taker had a good feud with him, The Rock. I remember that it was 1999, the King of the Ring. There was Rock and Taker in the main event. Triple H got involved, of course. I think Triple H, I don't know, Triple H wasn't in the ministry, but he was in cahoots with Undertaker.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in any event, that's really the only time I can remember Undertaker being, I mean, he wasn't really a heel after that. He left, he came back with a different character, the American Badass. And then he left again, and he was a dead man again. So that's what I mean by saying you might want to be a heel, but the crowd ain't gonna let you. So,
Well, and see, that's part of the reason why Taker, believe it or not, did not make my list. Now, we all know Taker is one of my favorites of all time, but when he was a heel, I just felt like some of the storylines were kind of stupid. I did not like the Ministry of Darkness, the whole thing, kidnapping Stephanie and embalming people. I'm like, okay, kind of, come on, man.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and look, I just love Taker. Even when he was a heel, I just love Taker. So, yeah, for me, I just couldn't put him on the list. Not that he wasn't a great heel, but the writers didn't help him.
Mm-mm.
But my number 6, I'm curious to see if this makes your list. My number 6 is Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Now, when we talk heels, there are very few in WWE, WWF history that are bigger than the chairman himself. All right. Everything from the Montreal screw job, where I don't know whether, I mean, look, I don't know if that's heel shit because allegedly it's a real event.
Yeah. What better way
Even
to
if
get
you
heat?
believe it's a work, either way, wow, that's heel shit. Making people kiss your ass, and I mean literally kiss your ass, like you're pulling your drawers down, your cheeks are out, and people are putting their lips on it. As a wrestler, and I use that word loosely when I talk about Vince, not much of a wrestler, but look, he could be in an entertaining match. He could take big bumps. He did the underhanded shit that you would expect a heel to do, both in the ring and out of the ring. His character, I mean, man,
Yeah.
truly one of the most hated characters in the history of his business.
Forget characters, hated people in wrestling.
Yeah, man, for real. I mean, so I had to include him on this list. I feel like number 6 is right because I like the 5 that I have above him. But Vincent Kennedy McMahon definitely deserves to be on the list of greatest wrestling heels, to me, on anyone's list.
Well, stole my thunder a little bit because I did not think you was gonna have him on your list. I did not.
I didn't think you were.
He ain't
I
gonna
didn't
do
think.
it.
Okay, I didn't think you were. That's why I prefaced my comments right at the beginning saying I'm not sure if you have him on your list, but yeah, man, I'm curious to hear where you have him.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
Okay.
We will see. All right. Now the top 5 here, these are like got under my skin, annoying, and that's kind of how I rated them in the top 5. Like how much could I not stand you? Will you shove down my throat so much where I just like, oh, do I want to change the channel? I'm so tired of seeing you. Or are you just getting under my skin, you know? So coming in number 5, a guy that has recently this year put on a array of good matches, a string of good matches, and is in better shape than he ever was when he was wrestling back in the day. And I'm talking about the rated R superstar Edge. Man, when he got on his high horse of I want to be champion, he was dead serious. It was Triple H-esque, as in he would do whatever underhanded thing he could possibly do. And then they introduced Money in the Bank, and that guy used the reason the 24/7 championship exists is because of him. So I guess we have him to blame as well for that. Because that's what he did. That's how the Money in the Bank briefcase was introduced and it was used. You know, it was a championship opportunity, and he was the first one to win it, and he cashed in on John Cena after a John Cena match, and being the first person to do it, we didn't think that he would do it after a match. We thought that it would just be, okay, I'm going to challenge you here for this show, and we're going to have a match, not anytime. So that was really intriguing at the time. The first one he didn't have, the first reign wasn't very long. I do remember that, but he would go on to get the title after that. He was also with Lita at the time, and they were having all these shows on Raw.
Yeah. Let's just leave it at
that. Yeah. Wasn't always a PG show. Let's just say that.
Well, he was the rated R superstar.
The rated R superstar. That's where that came from. And if you don't, if you ain't getting a hint, go on YouTube and look up Edge and Lita. There you go. He kind of got into the spirit of John Cena. Had his own little belt. It still spun, which was stupid, but it was still, had his Edge, logo and stuff on it. I was so sick and tired of him. He literally feuded with everybody that I liked, from Batista to Rey Mysterio. When he got rid of Lita, he had Vicky Guerrero. And when he had Vicky Guerrero, he had the Edge heads. I mean, it was just nonstop with Edge for like 6 years. It was just Edge, 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 Edge. There was even a pay-per-view, I think with No Way Out 2010 or 2009. He lost the championship in the first match, cheated his way into the second elimination chamber match, and won that championship. And what the hell? So yeah, he was great at it, but it got on my fucking nerves. He just did. And that was what he was supposed to do. So yes, Edge as a heel with all the different iterations is number 5.
Good call. And we're in my top 5 now. My number 5, this is an interesting one because this guy is really not known as a wrestler. And anybody who watches wrestling know that some of the biggest heels in wrestling were not always the wrestlers. They were the managers of the wrestlers. Now, even though this manager had a very short-lived wrestling career, I don't even think most people would realize this guy ever wrestled. He's mostly known as being the manager for people such as Mr. Perfect at a
It's
time.
gonna be who I think it is.
It's Bobby the Brain.
Yeah.
I love Bobby the Brain Heenan. There has never been a manager in the history of wrestling who has been a bigger prick, bigger asshole, a more hateful son of a bitch than Bobby the Brain Heenan.
And more than Paul Heyman.
You know what, man? To me, not that'd be more of a question for Book, but for me, it's Bobby the Brain Heenan. Heyman is great at what he does, but Bobby the Brain Heenan was just.
Oh, I love Bobby.
Yeah, the epic prick, and all of his, all the underhanded shit you would see a manager do to get their wrestlers to win. Bobby did that. There were even times when Bobby would turn on his own wrestlers. I mean, he was managing Hercules Hernandez, a wrestler, kind of an okay wrestler from back in the 80s, sold him as a slave to the $1 Million Man. Just sold him. Would just turn on wrestlers.
What?
Yeah,
We can't
not like as
that.
not like as a slave. Not like that was a term they used. That was the term they used, though. Ted DiBiase said, "I've come out and I've bought my own slave," and it was Hercules Hernandez. Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, look.
Before my time,
cancel culture didn't exist back then. Political correctness was just in its infancy. It wasn't like it is today. Whether it's right or wrong, you could push the envelope more back at this time. You couldn't get away with that today, obviously. But yeah, Bobby the Brain Heenan, I mean, man, the ultimate prick. Also a great heel commentator, working with him and the late great Gorilla Monsoon. Probably, I actually love Gorilla Monsoon with Jesse the Body, but I also love him with Bobby. The combination of Gorilla and Bobby, or Gorilla and Jesse, toss it up in the air. One day I might say I prefer Gorilla and Jesse. One day I might say I prefer Gorilla and Bobby. But yeah, man, Bobby the Brain Heenan, not a wrestler, but definitely one of the greatest heels in the history of wrestling. And to me, you got to have him on your list. And so that's where he's at for me, number 5.
Yeah. I guess it's just different because by the time I knew who Bobby the Brain Heenan was, he was already commentary
Gotcha.
in WCW. And but I could understand his heel tactics, because every show, whether it was Nitro or pay-per-view, he did whatever he could to get under Tony Schiavone's skin. And it usually worked. And he was not like Jerry the King Lawler, where his jokes kind of hit you over the head. Bobby was very subtle, and either you caught it or you didn't. He wasn't going to say it again. So I always appreciate that about him. And I do miss him, and I hate that, we lost him so early and didn't really get to go out on his own terms. Dude had, of all people, to have, throat cancer.
Yeah.
So,
but what I think is great about our podcast is, and I knew it would be great for this one, is that, we come from different generations. I'm a little older, you're a little younger. And I think it's great to have both of those perspectives on the show.
Oh yeah. But but at the same time, like, I can appreciate Bobby Heenan. Really can. All right. Number 4.
Uh-oh.
You smell it? Somebody's cooking. Yes. Rocky Maivia, aka The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is number 4, coming in number 4. And it'd be remiss not to be on a heel list, because you got to talk about when he was with the corporation. He was a corporate champion, the corporate elbow. When he was feuding with Stone Cold Steve Austin, WrestleMania 16, 15, I think it was 15. Yeah, 15. And then he had the smoking skull belt was introduced. He took the smoking skull belt, was wearing it like he was champion. They had that whole segment on Raw where he had knocked Stone Cold off a bridge into a river. And then did the whole funeral scene, and then Stone Cold had the monster truck and ran over his Lincoln Continental. Never forget it. I'll never forget it. But as good as that was, he would come out and cut promos on people. It didn't matter who you were, with his suede shoes, his size 16 boots, shoes, and his slacks, and his Hawaiian shirts, and pork chop sideburns. I think I enjoyed the bald-headed, black-vested heel Rock even more when he was Hollywood Rock, because he would come out and do these concerts. And I think the most notorious one is the one in Sacramento. He's singing in the ring, leaving Sacramento. Look it up. It is hilarious. I just think it's just a case of he went from one type of heel to being a babyface for a long time, and then the people started to reject him because they saw what he was doing. They saw he was going to Hollywood. They saw that he was not around as much. He was still coming back though. And they rejected him for it. And instead of trying to earn their love back, he said, well, this worked before, it's going to work again. F you too. Throw it right back at you. But a lot of people still liked him, even though he was a heel, and even though that's the character he was working. I think, and he changed it. He wasn't talking slow, and, he was still roasting people, but just different. He just did it differently. And he always came out in that black vest, and he worked it. He worked that black vest, and he was starting to get that other tattoo, that one that everybody seems to want. But yeah, The Rock, the great one.
All right, well, listeners, send in all your hate mail if you want to. Rock's not on my list, and I'll tell you why. It's personal for me. I always liked The Rock. Even as a prick, The Rock was always likable to me. That charisma, you just could see that charisma. You could just see that in him. And he was always, even as a prick, he was always likable to me. Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't a great heel. He was a different kind of heel. But man, he was so good at dissing people, right? He was so good at the way he would just put them down. It would make you laugh, even if it was a wrestler you liked that he was ragging on. I love
that he would start cutting promos and the crowd would sing along, and he would stop and go, "This ain't sing along with The Rock."
Exactly. but that's the point, is that even as a heel, he was so engaging, so charismatic. The crowd would hang on his every word. And that's not his fault. He's great at what he does, but I prefer my heels to be the hateful, despicable guys. For some people, the heel Rock was hateful and despicable. For me, he was always engaging and hilarious, and I never really had that disdain and hate for him that I did like an Edge or like a Randy Orton or Vince McMahon.
Well, there's also the feud with Mick Foley and Mankind. I mean, when the Royal Rumble 99 and St. Valentine's Day Massacre 99, the first one was an I Quit match, and he beat the fucking shit out of Mankind in front of his family. Was he electrocuted him? And they had it, well, they cheated because they had it over the, through the arena. They piped it in, and Mankind saying, "I quit." And then they had the match at St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And I just remember the chair shots were so hard, and they were all to the head, both of them.
Yeah. There was one of those matches, I think Foley was handcuffed. His hands were behind his back, and he couldn't even block the chair shots. And I remember watching that, and we've mentioned it a bunch of times on the show. Mike, Book and I, at Billy Joe's Picture Show. That was one of the most brutal matches I've ever seen. I never want to see that again. I wasn't even though I wasn't as aware back then of the issues with concussions, that still was hard to watch.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Is that the match that they reference in Beyond the Mat?
Beyond the Mat. Yeah. His family was there watching it.
That's terrible. That is absolutely terrible. And I'm glad that we know more about concussions and stuff today, and they're taking precautions. You can have a great match without taking it to that level. That took it to an uncomfortable place for me. I mean, look, it was great heel shit by The Rock, but boy, brutal to watch.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, that one. Especially when you know the backstory. I can't go back and watch that one either. I can watch the St. Valentine's Day one. But that Royal Rumble match, when we say brutal, I mean, it's almost a lynching. I mean, you're handcuffed and you can't do anything. Yeah. And this man is just beating you senseless.
Yeah, that one is rough for me.
So that's what I mean by like heel. At that point, Rock was like heel. Let's heel shit.
Right. Well, I believe we're up to my number 4.
Number 4.
Right. And my number 4, I believe, was your number 5, and we're talking about Edge. And so I don't have to really go over it a whole lot. But there was a time when Edge was so good at being a heel. I mean, like I said, that's what a heel does. I hated Edge. I mean, yeah, I know dude's a great wrestler. I've seen him in some great matches. I respect all that. But dude, this character, I hate you. I hate it. Get off of my TV screen.
Right.
Get out of my ring. I don't want to see you. Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of looking at you.
Yeah, man. But that is what a great heel does, man. To me, that is heel shit. You're not supposed to like a heel. You ain't supposed to laugh at a heel. You know what I mean? And a heel is supposed to push those envelopes. Sometimes take you to those uncomfortable places like that. We talked about the thing with Lita.
Now, keep it real. Keep it real. Did that make you uncomfortable?
Oh, it did. Yeah. Definitely it did. Yeah, for real it did.
Okay.
It did. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you're telling me I'm going to see Lita naked, I don't mind that, but I don't also want to see Edge. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, when the blanket came off, he was in some stuff too.
Yeah. So, like I said, but man, once again, a wrestler goes back and forth. And I think Edge can do either one of them effectively. To me, he's not necessarily better as a heel than as a face. I think he can do either one. Certain wrestlers, as I've said earlier in the podcast, are just better as heels. I don't know if I'd say Edge is better as a heel, but he is a spectacular heel. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I put him at my number 4, the rated R superstar, man, specifically that character, Edge.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to put him on your list. I mean, there was a time I was a personal trainer. I was hanging out with amateur wrestlers, and they invited me over to watch that very pay-per-view that I talked about when he lost the belt and then won the belt later. And the guy was just like, man, Vince must really love this dude to keep putting him over like that. So, yeah. Must have been something. Okay. And I can't believe I'm beating you to the punch on this one. I really can't, but here we go. This guy came in about 1999. He really came on. And he didn't know if he could be a heel because of his track record. His other profession that he did forever. I mean, when you're representing the red, white, and the blue, and you got them gold medals, it's a little hard to be a heel. But lo and behold, he made one of the greatest heels of all time for a very, very long time. And if you don't know who I'm talking about by now, I'm talking about Kurt Angle, Mr. Three Eyes himself. Intensity, integrity, and intelligence. I hated him from the very first vignette that they showed. I said, I'm not going to like him. I can tell already. And he came out, had one of his first matches. His first pay-per-view match was with Sean Stasiak at Survivor Series. And if you go back and watch that match, you could tell Sean Stasiak was not happy about doing that match. He did not want to put that guy over because after the angle slam and the pin, dude got right up. And that's a wrestling no-no. You put that move over. He did not do it. But he immediately, the crowd, I mean, just shit all over this guy from the jump. And he zero entertainment experience, just a straight up real wrestler, one with a broken neck. We all know the story. But the fact that he could work that mic the way he could and get a crowd to hate him, and the fact that he would win a championship and just cry after he won it and just walk us around just crying. And then he even had the Intercontinental and the European Championship at one point. And then when he lost those, he within the first year, he was WWF champion. He beat The Rock. Okay, that's just the credit to him. And he would go on for, he had a decent title reign, the first one. And I despised everything about him. Even when he was trying to be face, and he had that segment backstage with Stone Cold, or was it The Rock? It was either Stone Cold or The Rock. I can't remember. But he had that little bitty ass cowboy hat.
That was Stone Cold.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That was funny. That was
I just was like, even though, yeah, it's funny, but I still can't stand you. I even really couldn't stand him because that love triangle that he was trying to force with Triple H and Stephanie, that really bothered me. I mean, really bothered me. Like, I know it, I guess I didn't know as much as I know now, obviously, but it really bothered me, and I couldn't wait for Triple H to kick his ass. And Triple H was not a babyface, by the way. So it was really strange. But yes, Kurt Angle, great heel. He would, eventually get his head shaved, and he was still kind of a heel. He was more intense. He was a better wrestler later in his career. But yeah, he should be on everybody's heel countdown because for nothing else, how great he was at it. I mean, he was fantastic. Can't teach that. He just came out the gate swinging.
Well, he's not on my list.
Oh my God. I can't believe it.
No, here's why. I'm sure he'll be on Book's list. Book and I kind of both took to Kurt early on, but that's part of once again, it's a me issue. I always liked Kurt. I always liked him now.
I couldn't stand him.
Were there times as a heel when I didn't like him? Yeah, there were a couple of storylines where I'm like, oh man, this dude, ooh. But for the most part, I just always liked Kurt. And I know that Mike, Book, I'll call him Book on the show, Mike and Real, but yeah, Book on the show. WrestleMania 21. Angle's taking on Shawn Michaels. Michaels, huge face.
Mm-hmm.
Angle, huge heel. Mike and I are the only two guys, and I think one other guy was rooting for Angle. Angle gets over in that match, and me and Mike and this guy, neither one of us knew, just start high-fiving, hugging. We're all about it. He was a great heel. But like I said, for me, a great heel should make me hate you. And Angle, with the exception of a couple of storylines, I don't know if you remember the storyline between Booker T, and Sharmell, where Kurt was like sexually obsessed with Sharmell.
No, I don't remember that.
Oh man, you need to go back and Google some of that or YouTube some of that. That stuff was really uncomfortable and weird. I mean, he really had this thing for Booker T's wife. You've got to go look at that.
I just remember the thing for Stephanie, and it was that was creepy because she was asleep one time and he snuck a kiss in.
Oh no, man! I'm telling you, if I don't even know if that stuff, if you'll be able to find that stuff out on YouTube, they may have pulled it because it's. Just try to look for it. Let me know if you find it. But that stuff was really uncomfortable. But Kurt, of course, great in the role. But I've got my top three here. I feel pretty good about. And man, like I said, I tried to leave it to guys who I just despised. There are some who I like in addition to despising them, but in their heel role, I completely despise them. And so I didn't completely despise Kurt in his role. I sometimes liked him in his role as a heel. So unfortunately, maybe shockingly to some, he's not on my list, but I feel good about the top 3 that I have here.
Okay.
All right. So is it my turn? Or
Yeah.
my number 3? Okay.
Yeah, number 3. Yep.
My number 3 is one, and I don't know if a lot of people would have this on their list, but he was always one of my favorites. And if you remember, I represented this guy. I had a t-shirt I wore, a cutoff t-shirt I wore at WrestleMania 24. I didn't wear it at WrestleMania 24, but I wore it that weekend.
Yep.
Simply ravishing Rick Rude. Muscular, pretty boy. Ultimate prick.
Long hair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Women loved him. Women loved him. Men hated him. He would come to the ring in these robes, not nearly as fancy as what you'd see a Ric Flair in, but he'd come into the ring in these robes, and he'd take it off, or before taking it off, he would say something like, I'm at a house show in Des Moines, and he says, I'd like to, let me see if I can remember. Yeah, for all of you Des Moines dirtbags, let me take off my robe and show all of your ladies what a real man looks like.
A real man looks like.
Yeah, he would take off his robe. He would flex.
Was his thing.
He would twirl his hips, and man, like I said, he had some good rivalries with Piper. When, believe it or not, when Piper was a face at a time. For those who don't remember, Piper had a run as a face, a couple of runs. Jake the Snake Roberts. He made a pass at Jake the Snake Roberts' wife. The dude just was perfect for this role. I don't really ever remember Rude being a face.
No.
Because he was so convincing as a heel, you couldn't make him a face. It wouldn't work. He just was perfect. His look, his attitude, everything about him said heel, said prick. That's the only thing you could cast him as, the only way it would work. And to me, that is classic heel shit. Convince me that you are an asshole. Convince me you are a prick. And Rick Rude never convinced me of otherwise. Not for 1 second. He was always a prick. He
had a huge feud with Sting.
Yeah.
WCW.
I wasn't there for that, but I know that he did make his way to WCW, and he was a prick there as well, because that's all Rick Rude could be. His name is Rick Rude. How can that be a face? So I wanted to show some love to Rick, because I don't know how much love he gets on lists like this. He should get more, but he is my number 3 because heel through and through. Was never a face, always a heel. The late great ravishing Rick Rude.
Yes, and then I had Kurt Hennig, his running mate. They actually went to high school together. I mean, they were like legitimately best friends. And as much as I hated them both in WCW, I was shocked and hurt. When I found out they both passed away. I mean, they died the same year. Yeah. It's eerie. Yeah. I think Rick was 40 and Kurt didn't even make it to 40.
Yeah, man, the wrestling business, especially back then, it was tough. So many road trips. I don't want to get into speculation about some of the extracurricular activities the wrestlers were doing at the time. I'll let people judge that for themselves.
Well, I mean, there's no speculation. I mean, it was all the same kind of deal. We're not bashing. This is just the facts of the matter. Painkillers, alcohol, it's a bad mixture. Yeah. And when you're working as much as these guys are working, and you're taking those bumps, eventually you need painkillers. That's just the way it goes. But you're also partying almost every night. So that combination is too much stress on your heart. Also, you throw in steroids, which a lot of these guys were on. So it's a cocktail for early death. That's not me being mean. That's just the reality of the situation. It's very unfortunate, and we're not talking about over-the-counter medicine. When I say painkiller, I ain't talking about Tylenol. I'm talking about the strong shit.
Yeah. And I think real wrestling fans know that that's all sadly a part of the business. Maybe not so much today, but it definitely was during Rude and a lot of these other wrestlers' heyday.
Yep. Okay. Here it is. Number 2. And he just barely, he was flirting, as Book would say. He was flirting with number 1, but I just couldn't quite do it. And it is the man himself, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, the CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment, formerly known as the World Wrestling Federation. You could argue he's the greatest heel of all time. You really could. And I almost put him as that. But because he wasn't a constant, he would have certain feuds with people and he would go away, he would go in the background, he would just, which was smart to me, even to this day, as much as people chatter on the internet, social media about the product and everything. Anytime Vince shows up, people lose their minds. So he still has it, that part. But this guy is the heel of heels. The only white man I've ever seen on national television use the N-word and this zero backlash. Okay. I mean,
well,
in front of another brother too, Booker T. Like,
it was a different time. I'm telling you, today that would not fly. That would never fly today.
So we had the N-word, we had the feud with God, we had him faking his death, we've had him wrestling Stone Cold, wrestling all of your favorite wrestlers, feuding with them.
Wrestling his own son.
Having his wife beat him up. I mean, all this shit. And then there's been other rumors about storylines they never happened. But storylines that he had in mind for Stephanie, his own daughter, that were, sick. Yeah, he's the ultimate heel. I mean, the Montreal Screwjob, you want to talk about that? You could talk about not wanting to put certain wrestlers over, changing cards at the last minute. You could go on and on and on about things that this man has done to get under your skin. You have to respect him, though. There's the one thing I can never, ever say about Vince McMahon is that he can say to anybody that wants to work for him, he can say, I will never ask you to do anything that I'm not willing to do or that I have not done. And that's 1000% the truth. Yep. In that case, he's telling the truth. Look it up. The man has done it all. He's taken some horrible, scary bumps over the years and just lived to tell about it. So if you coming in his company talking about you ain't gonna do this, you ain't gonna do that, see ya. I've done it. My son Shane has done crazier shit than he has, even. So yeah, he has to be on the list. I remember that Royal Rumble where it was him and Austin going at it. I mean, that really sealed the deal for me. That feud with him and Stone Cold. Straight up. He made Austin. Yep, he made Austin a superstar. As much as people didn't like him, he made Austin. So yes, number 2, Vince McMahon.
All right, well, my number 2, and you've already mentioned him, my GOAT, the Nature Boy.
Nature Boy.
Ric Flair, the limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, son of a gun, the dirtiest man in the game, dirtiest player in the game. I mean, all of the catchphrases, all of the whole persona. Now, I've been watching Ric Flair. I think the first time I saw Ric Flair in person, I must have been 12, maybe 13. And he was a heel at the time. He was the world champion. This is before it's not before WWE, but wrestling, it was territories. It was the National Wrestling Alliance, and he was touring the Midwest. He was taking on Handsome Harley Race, former champion. And I'm rooting for Harley Race, but I'm still enamored with this young, blonde, cool guy wearing these fancy robes. And a bunch of us kids gather around the ring. We want to get a closer look at Ric Flair. And he's like, damn kids, get away. Go back to your seats. I don't, he's just being a complete asshole. But man, look, the Four Horsemen, that whole faction. Flair rode the line for me because I've talked about how a heel should be despicable. And in the early days, he was. But once again, I go back to me being a child. Kayfabe was the rule. And, oh man, when Flair really first started to hit, I still believed wrestling was real. So what he was doing, the asshole he was being, was real to me. And then come to realize later that, a lot of the stuff Ric Flair, the character, did was pretty much the same thing that the Ric Flair, the man, did. He's cheating on his wife. Man, dude would get drunk before a match, wrestle for 60 minutes, sleep with 5 or 10 girls, get on the road, drink down another pint while he's driving to the next city, party all night. He lived the life. And so that's why he was so convincing in this role. But he was always cool when it came time to putting the other wrestlers over. And that's what you have to do when you're a big heel and they want to elevate the face, which happens in the business. You just have to do that sometime. Flair was always, that's why he was champion for 16 times. People forget, yeah, he won 16 times. That means he lost 15 times, Keep that in mind. Trying to get over those other wrestlers. But ultimately, even though he's gone back and forth between face and heel, it's the heel Ric Flair that I think most people remember fondly. That is the Flair, the definitive Flair for most people. It's the definitive Flair for me. And so that's why he makes my number 2 on this list. The great, the GOAT, my GOAT. Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
Ric Flair. All right. Number 1. Who is my number 1 heel?
I'm curious about this because I'm trying to think of a wrestler's name I haven't heard yet. But I'm curious. So yeah, just lay it on me.
Who got under my skin the most over the years? Well, we already talked about him earlier. Said he was on my countdown. Didn't say where. But he's gone by many monikers. The aristocrat. The Game. The King of Kings. The Benchmark. Triple H. This guy, by the time I got to liking, I actually liked him. We're talking over a decade of me hating him. So it was weird to cheer him. We're talking the DX days when he did the Croc promo, that when he invaded WCW with DX, when he left DX and he was just like Edge, gung-ho about winning the championship, and he just couldn't get it done. He was obsessed. He was just running through people. He had a strap match. I remember, we need to do a retrospective on this as well. Fully Loaded, 1999. We need to do that.
I'm in.
And then who could forget the McMahon Helmsley era when he took Tess Woman essentially out of the blue. I didn't know where they were going with that whole thing. I was kind of happy for Tess and Stephanie. I was hoping that we were going to see this whole thing through, and then Out come Triple H saying, "Oh no, she's actually my wife." And they had the match at Armageddon with him and Vince. Stephanie with the turn. Nobody saw that coming. And then for the next year, a couple years, they just pretty much ran the company because no Stone Cold, no Rock. This is who we got. Him and Mankind. I think Rock was around for a little bit, but not nearly as much as he used to be. So we had that. And then we had Triple H as the Game. When they kind of evolved from the McMahon Helmsley era to just being the Game. And then he got hurt, came back as the Game, even more intense. You know, now that's when he came back with the Motorhead music I'm talking about. And he was all jacked up, you know. Still, he was kind of a babyface for a little bit, but he didn't know how to be a babyface. You could tell he was more of an anti-hero. And eventually they would turn him back heel. And he would deal with Ric Flair. And then he would form Evolution. Still can't stand this guy. I mean, he just never lost. Every underhanded, crooked thing you could think of, he just did to win. And that was always the case. Even, who could forget his time with China? Let's go back to even that. China always cheating for him. Like, he's just always had somebody. With China, Stephanie, Rick, it didn't matter. He just always had someone. And he would cut these promos, these long, lengthy promos, and he would talk in this cadence, because I'm the Game. You know, he's just everything about him just made him hate you. Hate him. I mean, the way he dressed, suits. You know, he wanted to be Ric Flair. Ric Flair was his idol. So, you know, he wore the suits. He rode the jets. Ric Flair was his first choice for his stable, Evolution. And he would recruit Batista and Randy Orton. Okay. And that whole feud for a year, those two ran, the whole group ran roughshod. And then even go fast forward to what's best for business. The Authority. Him and Stephanie again. Yep. You couldn't stand them. You wanted them to lose. And then they had that Survivor Series match where Sting showed up. And you had Triple H versus Sting. I mean, the guy knows how to be a heel. It took him longer, but eventually people had to go, I mean, well, it's Triple H. We like Triple H. So, but there was a long time. I couldn't stand him when he used to wear that Harley Davidson hat and he came out with the jean outfit and he was always chewing gum and cutting promos. He just never seemed to lose. I couldn't stand him. He always cheated with that damn sledgehammer. Nobody else has gotten under my skin more than Triple H did. But now looking back, it was good stuff. I think if we knew what we know now back then, I wouldn't hate him as much. But I'm glad that it was legitimate hate, can't stand you. And yes, he's my number one. To me, the greatest heel in the last 20 years. Yes, even better than Randy Orton, better than MJF. You know, he just had a way about him. I'm not going to say he's the greatest heel of all time. So that's for another show. But he's definitely probably the greatest heel in the last 20 years.
You know, I don't know if I could argue with that, because if you look at my top three, and I'll get to my number one, but yeah, Flair and Rude, Edge. I mean, you know, I guess Edge is within the last 20 years, but you know, I can't argue Triple H. I can't argue any of these. I mean, you like I said, the ones I had in the middle, I kind of could have rearranged either way. But I don't think my number one is going to be a shock to anybody. I've said it many times on this show, and normally I would be wearing the hat that has his nickname on it. But my Broncos, coming. Yeah, well, my Broncos had a big win today, so I had to represent. But my number one is the late great Roddy Piper. I've said this many times. Wrestling, it's so different today, and just society as a whole is different. Cancel culture and political correctness, and I don't want to mention some of the other movements and stuff. I don't want to offend anyone, but what I'm trying to say is that society is just nicer now. I'm using air quotes, and nicer is not necessarily a bad thing, but in the world of wrestling, and like I said, Piper was still big during the kayfabe days, and wrestling just was more willing to push the envelope at that time. And Roddy Piper was a character who was not afraid to offend anyone, whether they were black, white, male, female, skinny, fat. I mean, we saw Roddy Piper slap midgets around. We did. We saw him slap a midget, shave his hair. We saw Roddy Piper paint himself half black.
I was gonna ask about the blackface.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we saw he went. Look, he was in this feud with Mr. T,
slapping midgets.
Yeah. He was in this feud with Mr. T, and he, of course, he's trying to get heat. And he went to Vince, said, "Look, I want to do this promo. I want to paint myself half black." Vince looks at him and says, "I love you." Because I don't think it's anything Vince would have ever asked him to do, because even back then it was kind of dicey. But Piper just jumped in and said, "I want to do this." Wow. Piper also at one time whipped Mr. T across the back with the belt while Randy Orton's dad, Cowboy Bob, held his hands. Whipped him across the back, leading up to a match at WrestleMania 2. Rowdy was in the match at WrestleMania 1. It was he and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff against Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. WrestleMania 1 changed the world of wrestling as we know it. The reason why they had Rowdy in that spot is because he was the biggest heel ever. At that time, he was the most hated wrestler in the history of wrestling. Hulk Hogan was the most beloved wrestler in the history of wrestling. Perfect match. That feud between Hogan and Piper, look, Hogan was already over, right? He was already over, but still, I think most faces at some point in their career, they need that heel, that guy who just the audience just hates to elevate their level as a face. Yeah. Roddy Piper was that guy for the red and yellow Hulk Hogan. You know, people would pack arenas. They would pack arenas to see Hogan no matter who he wrestled, but they would really, I mean, you could sell out any arena if you had Hulk Hogan taking on Roddy Piper. The first WWE card I ever went to was the Wrestling Classic. This was about 80, this goes back to 85, 86. I think you can still find it on Peacock. It was at Rosemont, the Rosemont Horizon at the time. Oh. That was the first WWE show I ever went to. It's a tournament, but it's headlined by Roddy Piper challenging Hulk Hogan for the title. Piper was just that dude, fearless. There was nothing Piper would not do to get heat. He brought Jimmy Superfly Snuka, God rest his soul, into Piper's pit. That was Piper's show. That was his way of setting up all of these huge feuds. He bought Jimmy Superfly Snuka on the show, hits him upside the head with a coconut.
Oh.
I mean,
okay, I remember. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm starting to remember.
You know, and a lot of these things I mentioned are racially tinged, right?
I mean, that is very racist.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it, but look, Piper didn't give a damn, and you could get away with it at that time. If it got heat, Piper was all about it, and that's what a great heel does. You're like, I don't give a damn. I'm getting my heat. I'm doing my job. I'm being the heel. And why should you care what people think? You're a heel. You're not supposed to worry about what people think about it, whether people like it or not. You are a heel. And Piper did that better than anyone. Unafraid to push any envelope, to offend any segment of the community. He didn't care. And to me, that makes him the greatest heel ever. To me, I'm not going to say it's not debatable, but but I feel comfortable placing him firmly as my number one.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, anybody that's willing to go to those lengths, it's hard to argue.
Now, but here's the thing. In the locker room, all of the wrestlers say Roddy was the coolest guy. It was all just in an effort to get heat. That was not really who he was. He just loved being that character. He just loved being that guy. But he was not that dude in real life.
Well, I don't think you could get away with doing a lot of that stuff if you all didn't talk about it beforehand, on the same page.
Exactly. Exactly.
I watched a lot of interviews on YouTube with Stevie Ray, and he keeps it real about everything he talks about. And he talks about a lot of people that some people have this, we all have our images in our head or thoughts about a person. But when you hear somebody that is speaking genuine and they're saying, oh no, he was a good guy. And it's like, oh, well, I mean, now it's different because I know you're an honest person. So it's just it's just different. I like seeing candid, straight up, or old school wrestlers telling it like it really was back in the day. I mean, he's admitted to things that most people wouldn't tell the truth about, but he has. So that's how I'm saying. I know if he's saying somebody was a good person, they were a good person. He talked about the forbidden name, okay, Chris Benoit, and he said, dude, Chris was a good guy. He said, Chris, I think he had gotten into it with somebody on tour, and Chris Benoit, he talked about Chris Benoit coming by his room and just making sure he was okay. He just wanted to see he was okay. He was like, yeah, I'm good. He was like, all right, and he left. But it was just that at the time they weren't like this or anything, but they were cool. And he always remembered that, like, Chris was always a good guy. He said it just shocked that the whole incident, like most people said, shocked the hell out of him because it was like that was not who he was. So
yeah, and I believe that it was a horrible, heinous crime, and I would never ever excuse that. But I don't think that, obviously, and that's another podcast. Obviously, I don't think that's who Chris Benoit really was. I think if a full examination could be done, we would find that there are never an excuse to do something terrible like that. But I think there were probably reasons. We talked about the painkillers. We talked about the rigorous schedule. We talked about the steroids. And then we've also mentioned concussions. The wrestling business is a tough business. And I think the combination of some or all of those things played a big part in what we saw happen with Chris Benoit, and unfortunately what he did to his wife and his son.
Yeah, actually they did find he had CTE, a very extensive case of it. Yeah. And he pretty much had the brain of an 80-year-old man with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
At 40.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. But anyway, not put a damper on the show. Those are our top 10 heels and along honorable mentions. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you more in my lane, in my era, or are you more with Rob in his era? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you all for listening and watching. And huge shout out to the crew holding it down for the Survivor Series show. In my absence, I couldn't even tell that I wasn't there. Y'all did a fantastic job. So shout out to Rob, Blake, and Book. Thank you guys for holding it down. I wouldn't ask y'all to do it if I didn't think y'all could do it. But y'all killed it. Appreciate y'all.
Well, man, we appreciate you. I appreciate you having the confidence in me. In the 3 years we've done this podcast, I've never hosted. I never really wanted to be the host. Like I said on the show, I'm more happy being the drummer, the bass player, the guy kind of in the background, throwing in the assist when you need it. But you believing in me, because, man, I didn't think I could do it on the spur of the moment. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, man. But your belief in me and the help of Book and Inside Man Blake got me through. And I'm always appreciative, but glad you're back.
Right on, right on. So make sure y'all check out that show. It was great. You know, Rob had some one-liners in there that's definitely gonna make the year-end show for sure. And then I guess we got some stuff coming up. You know, we still have to do Rundown, Joker. I guess we're not gonna get a WWE pay-per-view until day one, which is New Year's Day.
New Year's Day. But are we doing War Games?
We are going to do War Games, even though it's kind of War Games just because.
I have to say, man, look, we'll do the show. I'm not sure about this talent, and I'm very curious to see if they can pull these matches off.
Well, in the past, and the point of a War Games match is that they built to it. There was conflict. There was people on both sides that had common interests. And there's none of that now. It's just you four, War Games on the men and the women's side. People that would never be on the same side. Because last time I checked, the very people teaming for the men, they all want to face Tommaso Ciampa for the championship. It's just the lack of consistency is hurting NXT right now.
It is. And look, man, I'm still trying to get used to some of the newer faces. I haven't been blown away by too many of the wrestlers' skills. You know what I mean? Like, you know, when we're talking like a Gargano or a Cole, what we used to see, I'm not sure I see some potential. Yeah, I see some potential, but I just don't see that lady, that dude who I'm anxious to see in a War Games match. But look, maybe they'll shock me. Either way, we'll be watching and we will be reviewing. And, you know, we keep it real on this show. And if it's not good, we're going to tell you we're going to tell you about it.
Maybe you should have won that match. But thank you all for watching, listening. Check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms: Apple, Podbean, Amazon, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. And of course, YouTube. Keep checking YouTube. There'll be more content. It's the holiday season, and as long as well as all my children's birthdays are all around the same time. Yeah. It's a little difficult for me to put out content while I got all that going on. So holidays may be a little slower, but there will still be content coming. So please continue to watch, continue to like and share. And so we get more subscribers. The goal is to get to 1,000. So let's do it, people. As always, Ambassador, send us home.
Hey, well, like Big E said, man, let's get to that 1,000 because we appreciate y'all. We've been doing this for 3 years. We're going to keep doing it. Let's hear from you. And look, let's get vaccinated. I hate to keep preaching about it, but there's a new variant out there floating around. You might want to get vaccinated just to as a precursor to protect yourself from this new variant. Maybe it gets to this country, maybe it doesn't. But flu season is here. Just get your vaccinations. Let's crush this thing so that we can go to live shows. No mask, no worries.
Yep. Yes, sir. Take care, everybody. Happy holidays. Enjoy the holiday season. Enjoy your families. And we will catch you all next time. Take care.